The legend of Voltron, defender of the universe.
Welcome back to Retro Wednesday on the Tidarium Hangar. Today I'm going to talk to you about Voltron, specifically the Lion Voltrons. I'm going to talk about vintage, go a little bit deep on the different vintage versions and iterations, show you some of the modern ones and just kind of the highlights, what I like, what I don't like with the modern ones. So let's get right into this. I'm going to start with talking about smallest to largest. The smallest are the figures. These figures were part of the Panache Place. They were not included with the Panache Place set. They were separate. They were sold individually. Nowadays, it's actually really hard to get their helmets. That's the hard part. Now, I have the ones with helmets in my Voltron, but looking at them, they look a lot like Star Wars figures. They're sized similarly. They have poses like Hunk does right here. And they do look very retro, very vintage, with only 5 points of articulation and a little bit of paint, some very minimal paint apps, but they do represent the vintage era. Coming over here looking at the bad guys, you have the King Zarkon and all of those. One thing that really stood out was you were supposed to believe that this row beast here were what were going to battle Voltron, but seeing how small they were compared to Voltron, there was really nothing for Voltron to fight other than a bunch of small figures. So I always thought that was strange in the vintage line, and I still think it's strange today. The first one I want to talk about is this motorized version. Now, if you notice, it's really small, and of course it's small, so it hit a lower price point for the kids. But it did have a function that none of the other ones did. It had these wheels on the bottom, and you could pull it back, and it would be a pull back and go kind of feature, which is why it had the whole name of motorized. There it goes. It actually goes pretty quick. As you're going to see, it has some features that the bigger one does, like covers for the front legs, and it has quite a bit of articulation for being so small. No die cast in this one, and I did kind of think it was a pretty good one. I never had one as a kid, oddly enough. I had the die-cast Bandai Matchbox version, but this one here looks pretty good, gets the job done, but it is super tiny. A lot of fun. Next up, I want to talk about the most popular version of Voltron, and that would be this Matchbox / Popy Go Lion version. And this is the US release version, and the US release version didn't even come with a sword or a shield. You actually had to buy all that separate. They offered it later down the road. So the one I had growing up didn't have a sword or a shield, so trying to collect these later on, I was like, I still remember having a sword or a shield with mine. So first off, it has a lot of weight behind it. It is hefty. It does have, like I showed you on the motorized covers here, and it does cover the legs, so when you form it, it has some shiny reflective chrome. And see, that's something that we just don't see much anymore in modern day toys, especially not on the main toy aisle. I think I actually have the legs on the wrong color leg on the wrong side, but it doesn't really matter. I don't really like messing with it too much because these things do get fragile and brittle over time. The sticker on here can show that it is an official, whatever. But the heads on the arms, on the green line and the red lion, they do fire off. Like this red one likes to fire off on its own. You're gonna find some of these things will wear out, and that will happen, but let's go ahead and fire the green one with the sword. I do want to show you some issues with the sword. First off, the chrome, that can start to wear off, and that becomes an issue, and it starts to not look so good. For whatever reason, sometimes the chrome, I don't know if they were supposed to be gold or the chrome just turned gold, but I got a gold one. And then this one was in such bad shape that I decided to just paint it. And it looks okay, but nothing looks better than having an actual chrome sword that's shiny. The shiny chrome sword is definitely the best. So here are the lions all armored up, and I do want to say about this that the US release, which is the most common around here, they took out the firing mechanisms from the 80s versions. And so this yellow lion is actually not from the US release, and so it is a Japanese release, which does have firing mechanisms in it in place. So I kind of armored this one up instead of a US release one, but I will show you the differences between the two. But real quick, they do have their weapons in their mouths, and of course those did not come with the original one in 1984. And so you had, I don't know where I got them. Now I think I picked these up just as I was buying lots. There was just some in it, and it just turns out I have one for each lion, so it works out for me. Taking a closer look at the yellow lions, and what I was talking about is how they did remove the spring mechanisms and the buttons from all of these ports so that you can't actually launch anything from it. So I don't like that that they took that away, but I understand, you know, dealing with laws and stuff like that. You know, it is what it is. So it makes the Japanese release much more sought after to get all the parts and little pieces that came with it. I want to move on to the Trendmasters version, which is this one here on the right. And upon first glance, they look like they're pretty much the same figure. But then when you start to look a little bit closer, you're going to see some differences that the 1998 Trendmasters had to this upgrade or downgrade, depending on how you look at it. First of all, there's no articulation in the elbows. It's just a straight arm. And so I think that was so that they could make the launching piece a lot longer, and maybe they had safety issues, I don't know, government regulations, who knows. Also, each lion has a compartment that opens up and has a driver in it. So really kind of cool that you could get the figures in there, and that works too. That's something that I think would have been fun if it was incorporated in the original one, but it doesn't make me like the original one any less. This one also has a different connection point. So the way these connect, they connect right here. That one fell off. That's a much different connection, the way this connects than the way the original one connected. And so I bought this one because I was going to strip it for parts to finish up one of mine, and when I got it I was like, wow, this is way different. And then I kind of like it because it's different. It's made completely of plastic. There is no die cast. I did take this missile off because I kept bumping it and launching it because the tail hitting it, but anyway, it's got a lot of similarities to the original, but yet it's so different. And for that, this 1999 Trendmasters one, well, that one goes down in history too. Now, Trendmasters made a die-cast one that was an exact replica, but the paint was a little bit different also. Next up, we have the Panache Place version, and it is massive. Compared to the original one, it was so much bigger, towered over the one I had as a kid. I had this one as a kid, and I absolutely hated the look of that one. Partially because I had this one, and I think this one looks better than the Panache Place, but I didn't really have an open enough mind about this set. Obviously, no articulation at the elbows. You have this weird kind of nonsense where you can't move the arm without moving this whole section. For that, I mean, I thought that was kind of a fail. I don't understand why they had to do that. And then also, it just overall looks weird and bulky, but that's so you can hold pilots. The pilots in each one of these fits in there, it works. It's the first one that actually had 3 3/4-inch action figures that fit in the lions, which was a good gimmick. It was a fun gimmick, but then you notice a few other things. Well, I'll show you an individual lion here in just a minute. Let's flip them around to the back. Really simple and plain. Almost felt like it was like the version you made for little kids, although they didn't make it for little kids. And I'm saying like 3-year-olds or 2-year-olds because it was so big and bulky. That was just sort of my thoughts back in the 80s on this. But as an adult collector, this thing is more and more sought after, especially because of those pilots. Here's the lion in lion mode. As you can see, the legs, the entire legs are one piece. They're formed in one piece. So you can't actually have any real articulation to him. You can probably make him look like he's in a running pose, like that, or a standing pose, more like this. That's about all you can do with it. The tail, not much you can do with that tail. No articulation there. The mouth does open and it's on a spring, which works. And this one's missing the canopy. I mean, I have an extra one, not just for fun. I don't know. I was gonna do a custom or something with it. But the fun part is the fact that it holds the figures. Next up, we have the Toynami Masterpiece. Now, this one was touted as the Masterpiece version, and there's a couple of issues with it. And I don't know if my set is just a combination of multiple sets or whatever, but it still works out. You could get this thing for about $100 still. So I think it's a pretty good value for that. It's a little skinny. I don't know how to explain it. Like, the waist is real skinny, and doesn't hold together really all that well. I think the die-cast version would have been better. This is the plastic with the chrome, which I was kind of hoping, rolling the dice, that would be die-cast on the one I got, but the one I got was, of course, plastic. I do prefer die-cast. Now, I heard there's issues with the die-cast because it can't hold the weight and bear the weight, so the plastic chrome might be the best option for this, because I haven't really had a whole lot of issues with mine, especially since it looks good, it looks the part. I don't know why the weapons are not chrome, so that was an issue, and I'm missing the little back pieces, whatever, but it's still a pretty cool looking figure, and I didn't want to go crazy and spend a whole lot of crazy money on them because I knew something better was coming along, and that something better is coming up. So I'm going to really compare these side by side. I've done it before, but I want to talk about the fact that this Bandai version, and mine's actually the KO, the Fantasy Jewel, and mine was only like $200 instead of the 300 reissue, and now those are like $500-$700, I don't know. But this guy is awesome. It is what you want in a Voltron. Unless you're the person that thinks bigger is better, if you want a same size Voltron, similar size to the original, it's a little bit taller than the original, but not much. But if you want similar size to that, but increased aesthetic, increased posability, everything across the board just increased and looking so much better. I do understand with the KO, people are having trouble with the arms connecting. Mine doesn't have that problem. And people are having trouble with tails breaking. And since I don't ever flip it around, I just formed it and let it stand. That is what it is. I think it is an amazing, amazing figure. And the original one, of course, is better. It's built better, and it has more features, such as more weapons and some actually shiny gold instead of just a flat gold color for the horns. But it does beat the Toynami. I mean, even if you get the KO, it's better than the Toynami. Although the Toynami's not bad, I don't even think you can get the KO less than 300 anymore. Stuff's really shot up in price, and I don't know if they're going to do another run. Are they going to do a 3.0 reissue from Bandai? I doubt it. Next up, we have Playmates entering the race with their version. And this one is cool in a lot of ways and has its own drawbacks, but I still like it. I'm glad that they made it. I'm glad that it exists. I like that it's bigger. I like that it's not as small as the original, and I keep wanting to pull the original over for size comparison so that everybody can know, but that's what he looks like size-wise. He is electronic. There's electronics in it, and my battery started to die, and I was like, well, let me change the batteries. And then I remembered that if one of these tails, or connector points actually, one of the connector points doesn't line up perfectly with this guy, then it starts to constantly make some sort of noise and talk about needing to combine again, and then has to go through the combine process. So I decided not to change the batteries in it. So we'll just get this out of it. But the electronics are cool. I think the electronics fail because they don't work perfectly. And it is a big issue. With it, you also have, like I pointed out with the Panache Place, you can't move the arm without moving this. But the fact this is lined up just right for a display is fine with me. Most people are just going to display it, not play with it. And it does have a bit of stability. You got to fiddle with this guy to get him to stand. I don't like that, but what are you gonna say? It's about $100, I think, is what it came to get one of these in the store. I don't know what they are secondhand now, but it's a pretty good looking bot, and it gets the job done. There it is. So what do we have left? We have the Trendmasters and the Matty collector. Talking about this Trendmasters one, Trendmasters did more with the license than I think any other company, because the license was bounced around so much. But when Trendmasters had it, they did a remake of the original Matchbox. They did their own version that looked like the original Matchbox with its own features. They did kind of just more or less a statue, and they called it motorized also, but it wasn't really motorized like the other small motorized, and it was about the same size. They also did their own take, just a completely different version that was kind of weird, like a stealth version. And then they did this guy. And they did a whole lot more stuff too, but those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. This guy here is pretty awesome. I only have 2 drawbacks on it. I would say this would be one of the top Voltrons. It is one of the top Voltrons, but there are 2 drawbacks. He's a bit bulky for Voltron in my mind. I think he's just a little too wide. But that's so that they can incorporate the figures, and it was kind of a step up for Panache Place. Well, a massive step up from Panache Place. And since we can, let's go ahead and do a comparison. Step up in size also. So that's obviously a much bigger figure. And so I think you can make it look a little bit sleeker. Well, they didn't quite make it look as sleek as I would have liked, but it still looks good. Now, let's point out a few features of this big, massive behemoth. First of all, you can open this up and gotta be real gentle. So the other negative that I have on this, this fires. The other negative I have on this set is the plastic, especially on the black line, is extremely brittle. So you can open it up and you can have figures in there. I just included one of these from the Matty collector set, and I really feel like this and Matty collector kind of compete for the best big one that's out there, unless you like the Shogun Warriors kind of stuff. And so all of these have the compartments that you can fire that thing, that you can hold the drivers, and it looks really good. I just love that whole feature with it. Every one of them has bombs, missiles, something going on. This one here has missiles right there that you can put, I don't know, got that right there. This one has missiles here, so as they form. Also, they have light up features. Some of mine have batteries that light up. Let's look. You can see each line's supposed to have the light up head. I guess I got to change the batteries out in them to make them work. Let's see. Some of them work, some of them don't. Some of them have the lights. Those little LR44s, I think, is what it takes. All right, here he is from the back. It definitely looks good. Bit stocky, of course, but for what they were trying to accomplish, I think they did a really good job with it. All right, so let's look at the difference in these Lion bots. Now, this is the big leg one. You can have the launcher up top. If you put the bombs in there, missiles in there, they would fire. You can put the figure in there. There's a nice big cockpit. Works really well. And on the bottom, if you push this button here, bombs would fall out if you had bombs in there. So that's a feature that's in all of them. Now, comparing this to the Panache Place, you're gonna see way bigger. This thing is way bigger than Panache Place, and it's just massive compared to it. There it is. And the way the cockpit works, I think, is integrated a whole lot better. I like the cockpit a whole lot more. That's how that works. So this is awesome. Now, funny thing is, the figures that they sold along with it did not look very retro. So it wasn't really that great of a deal. You still needed to get either the Panache Place versions to go in it, or you needed to get the figures. So I didn't even bother with those Trendmaster figures, but the Matty collector figures, those would work well in it also. What we have left is the insanely huge Matty collector. This was the crowdfunding, kind of like the HasLab Unicron that's going on, well, went on, now we're waiting for it to come out. But this was a bit different. You actually signed up for the Matty collector, and then they shipped each figure out, and they were like 55 bucks a piece. I think the Black Lion cost a little bit more. I think the arms were a little cheaper, then like $5 more for the legs, and then $5 more again for the Black Lion. I'm not sure, but I remember somebody telling me that if you signed up for it, start to finish, it was about $255 after each figure arrived. You had to pay for separate shipping. So like it should have been so much cheaper if they would have just sold it as a one lump sum kind of deal, kind of like HasLab's doing. But I think it looks amazing for what it is. It's a good looking figure. A good looking figure riddled with a lot of really silly issues. First of all, the posability. Now I'm not going to pose him around and try to move him around because he is hard to get to stand. It is hard to make him stand in a pose that looks somewhat decent. This pose I have him in now, it works. And then real quick you can see the green lion is kind of out of frame simply because the way I have him posed. But with that, he has this blazing sword that comes with it. But it's got more issues than just posability. If you look at the Blue Lion, you look at the legs of the Blue Lion, every Blue Lion I have seen has discoloring on the Blue Lion's legs. Why is the Blue Lion riddled with discoloring of the legs? That is really strange. I don't understand that. Also, there are issues with the legs popping out. So the gimmick is with this, you push a button and the entire lion will transform from the limb mode to boom, it's a lion. And that gimmick, if you accidentally bump the button or for whatever reason the legs just give, they just shoot out automatically, that is a pain in the butt. Trying to reset it and make it look right, I don't think that gimmick was really necessary. They should have worked more on the stability of the entire set and not that gimmick. I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to make the greatest Voltron ever, and they packed too much into it, and they couldn't quite accomplish it. But it is pretty awesome, and I just want to show you size-wise. This is the biggest, and if you have one of these, that's how much bigger he is. So if you're after a big one, you definitely want to go after Matty Collector. I want to show you the difference in the aesthetic between the Matty Collector and the Panache Place. Now, obviously, you're looking at 30, 35 years later, and technology's come a long way. And of course, action figure articulation, sculpting, and creation overall, manufacturing processes, have improved drastically with these guys. But looking at this, the Matty Collector looks so much better, so much more articulation, so much more modern than the Panache Place. But the Panache Place still has its quaint roots in its aesthetic. Looks a lot like a Star Wars figure, right? So I hope you enjoyed this look at Voltron and these vintage Voltrons, Lion Bots, and some of the modern takes. Let me know what you think in the comments. Which ones do you like the most? Do you even remember this thing? Like, subscribe to Hanger out.